Cool. Yep. Says it's working.
Yes. All
Make
right. All right. Doesn't want to advance the screen. Let me try this. There we go. So we'll start with a little bit of review of the aorist, which we looked at last time. We said that the aorist, it has some similarities to some of the 10 forms that we've learned, primarily to the imperfect in terms of the way that the tense form is generated, the way that we subject, or the way that we conjugate, not subjugate, let's say subjugate, the way that we conjugate verbs in what we call the first aorist form. There's two aorist forms. Both of them have an aorist meaning, but the first one has a different formation of the conjugated form than the second. So we have the augment, which again is similar to the imperfect. It's an indicator of past time. And we have this is arguable. I stated this as sort of fact, but it's actually arguable whether this sigma is part of the tense formative of the aorist or it's just included as part of the aorist root. And some grammarians will argue that the root here is lambda epsilon sigma alpha. Lambda epsilon sigma, with the alpha then being the first letter of the personal ending. But in any case, in its inflected form, surface form that we find in Koine Greek, you see that it has a sigma that is appended, and whether that's actually part of the tense form root or the stem there or not. So the aorist itself is a tense form in Greek that looks at things generally as a whole. We're not looking at the beginning, the middle, or the end, but an action from a perspective that sees the entire event, whether that event is long or short. Although there are some nuances to that, there's some instances where there may be some focus, some would suggest a focus on the beginning of the event. And there's, in some cases, for instance, we might translate the Greek verb archo is beginning to, and when we find it in the aorist. And so that's one possibility. There's other verbs as well that seem to have that sense of a transition or a shift, sometimes translated as beginning. But the major theme of the aorist is perspective, and it's the perspective of the whole. So this so-called constantive form, which we looked at last time, which is really, again, not looking at just any particular temporal component of the verb, but really kind of looking at it as just one action. To contrast that with the imperfect, we said, is an indicator of progressive action in the past. Now, the other thing I would say, and I don't know that I mentioned this last time, is that the aorist shouldn't be necessarily always construed as punctiliar, meaning it's describing an event which takes place in an instant of time or a specific point in time. There are uses of the aorist, for instance, in Romans chapter 5, which talks about the reign of death from Moses to Adam. The aorist is a basileiousen, and of course, we're not talking about a point event here, but a circumstance which reflected the entire history pre-Christ.
Yeah.
All right. And we looked at the three voices of the aorist, and we saw that we have, active, middle, and passive. So when we look at the active, we see again, regardless of whether we consider this sigma to be part of the stem or a tense formative, that the sigma dominates from the active forms across all of their number and person. And then that's also true for the middle as well as for the active. And then the tense formative, and there's broad agreement on this, that the theta eta here is not part of the tense form, but is actually a tense formative, and that indicates past time. So we notice that just we'll call it the third person singular with the movable new, which means that sometimes you see the new and sometimes you do not find the new.
Okay.
The other thing we will point out just by way of review is that you can see here in the third singular of the active form of this first aorist that there's the epsilon, and that differs from the alpha dominated connecting vowel, actually part of the personal ending here, or the rest of these paradigm examples in throughout the person and number. Okay. Still, just for review, it's we'll do a little bit of drill, maybe a little bit less, since we have people out sick today.
Yeah.
But let's take a look at this. We can do just a touch of review on this. I'm going to move my, give me 1 second. I'm going to actually move this window over, and it's resisting me. Yeah, but now I just changed the frame size, and there we go. Okay. All right. So the active first person aorist indicative would be elusa. Aorist. Sorry, we lost. Not sure what happened there. Aorist. This is actually the first aorist, but the aorist of second person singular elusas, and the aorist active indicative third person singular elusen. First person plural elusimen, second person plural elusate, third person plural elusan. All right, and then moving over to the middle, beginning with the first person singular. So we would have the aorist middle indicative first person singular elusame, second person singular eluso, third person singular elusato, first person plural elusamate, second person plural elusaste, third person plural elusanto. So by way of review, the aorist in the middle is subject affected. It oftentimes occurs again with verbs of motion or deliberation or contemplation. The passive forms can have either a passive or a middle meaning. So that was the big takeaway regarding the passive that we looked at last time. Let's walk through that paradigm. So aorist passive indicative, first person singular, elutane. Aorist passive indicative, second singular, elutes. Third person singular, elute. Elutamen. Elutata. And elutason. Okay. All right. And then very quickly, we'll do them all together. So starting with the aorist active indicative, first person singular, elusa, elusen, elusamen, elusate, elusen, excuse me, elusan. Aorist middle indicative, person singular, elusamen, eluso, elusamate, elusaste. Eluso. Hey, we get a little bit of the delay. Says, yeah. All right. So I'll let you. I'll say it. Then I'll let you do the response. So elutane.
Elutein.
elutes,
Elutes.
elute,
Elute.
elutemen,
Elutemen.
elutete,
Eluteta.
eluteson.
Elutesan.
Yeah, all right, very good. Okay, so let's move on to the second aorist verb. I'll repeat that the meaning is not different from the first aorist. It's just how you form the verbs, how they are conjugated, and how they're formed. So the aorist again, and here's a little bit of review. When in English we have a past tense, we add oftentimes ed or d. So the present tense live then becomes lived, jump becomes jumped, stall becomes stalled. And so there is a little bit of morphological difference. There's some rules you can define based on the sequence of vowels and consonants in terms of how you voice this. And then, of course, they're spelled sometimes a little bit differently. It just depends on the word itself. But the formation is essentially the same. We add a regular ending. And so this is really kind of the corresponding form to the aorist, first aorist of the Greek. However, there are irregular verbs, and this is really where the second aorist is a strong parallel to English. These are formed differently. So starting with English, we can oftentimes see internal vowel changes. So the past tense of eat would be ate, of fall would be fell, and then go actually, and this is actually a very strong parallel to what we'll see here in Greek. The past of go is formed on another verb that still exists in English, but only in sort of stock phrases. It's the word wend. And so it's not used typically. I would consider it to be archaic, except maybe in a few expressions. You might hear someone say, you need to wend your way through the crowd. The past tense of that is went. Well, the present tense wend began at some point to lose that meaning of go, and then it became the past tense of the verb go in English. And so we're going to see something similar here that happens in Greek as well. A few other examples here of irregular verbs from English. So speak, the internal vowel change you see now, it becomes spoke in the past tense. Have becomes had, hide becomes hid. So this is analogous to what we find again here in the second aorist. So we'll look at this here, where in a word like hamartano, right? So if you remember, how are we going to form the aorist from this lexicon form? Well, from the lexicon or the lexical form here, you're going to augment it, and then you would think that you would add the sigma alpha, right? However, neither of those things are actually true. In fact, what you have is a stem change. So here, where the omega is the lexical form, it's also the first person singular ending, the personal ending. So if you remove that, you have this stem, hamartan. The stem changes to amarton, or amart, excuse me. And then the Omicron new here is the personal ending. Okay. So we'll break this down in a little bit, but let me just give you a few more examples here. So again, you have a different stem here. Oftentimes the stem change will be different only by a consonant or two or by a vowel. So you'll notice here, instead of hamartan, you have hamart. And then as we'll see in a moment, this is the personal ending, first person singular personal ending. So likewise, lambano, we would expect that if this was a first aorist verb, that we would add the augment, then add the tense formative in the ending, or just the ending, personal ending here, and have alam bansa, but we do not. In fact, we have elabon. And so this stem here, lamban, actually, would then becomes lambda alpha beta. So we still have the augment right here, but now we have a new stem. And you can see it's been significantly shortened. And that's a trend you'll see with second aorist verbs. Oftentimes, the stem is related to the present tense, but will be abbreviated, and then the personal ending right here. One final example, erchomai, and you would think, if you just look over here to the right, you would think that you would augment the epsilon with another epsilon. It would lengthen to an eta with a smooth breathing mark, strong accent. And because this is a middle verb here, so this is the personal ending for the first person middle, you would think that you would see a form like this with a personal ending that you expect for middle verbs. However, you don't see that. In fact, what you see is not the first aorist middle ending, personal ending like this, but you see a whole stem change again. This epsilon lengthens upon augmentation to an eta. Here it has a change in the vocalization too. We have a circumflex accent with a smooth breathing mark, and then we have a different stem. So this would be akin to the English example, present tense go, past tense went. And here you can see we have a lambda theta. Lambda theta. So epsilon lambda theta is actually the stem, and then augmented with an epsilon lengthened to an eta and the personal ending. Okay, so we'll walk through some examples that'll hopefully make this a little bit more clear. So to summarize what we just said, for second aorist forms, frequently you will see, it says here spelling change. It is a stem change that oftentimes involves some different vocalization. There might be some different vowels and oftentimes different consonants with some abbreviation of that stem. However, the good news is that it's formed the same way that the imperfect is formed. And you probably noted that, or maybe you noted that even from the examples on the previous slide. So to get to your second aorist form, you're going to go through a stem change. It involves changes in your vowels, your consonants, and typically some abbreviation, frequently some abbreviation. You had the imperfect ending, and now you have the second aorist. All right, so again, looking at lambano, we'll walk through this. Again, the imperfect form, let's start with that, because that's the one that we are familiar with and that will have the same personal endings as the second aorist. We augment with epsilon. We have this in the imperfect, there's no stem change. And then we have the personal ending, first person singular. With me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. And you might remember that in the imperfect, that this personal ending, omicron nu, is the first person singular. It is also the third person plural. Only context would help us to determine that. But in this example, the intention is to create a paradigm. We're looking here at the first person singular. So in the imperfect, elambonon would be the imperfect. Active first person singular from lambano, and then now to get to the aorist. So we see the change, and in this case, there's no vowel change. There is a consonant collapse where now instead of the 4 letters here, it becomes 3 letters, and then again the addition of the same personal ending as you find in the imperfect. Another example is Pinot. And so in the imperfect, again, you would just take the verb stem. If this is the lexical form, you're going to drop the omega, add the augment, take the stem, and then add the personal ending, epinon, epinon. So pino, epinon. So present active indicative, first person singular, present active imperfect, first person singular. Second aorist, now we see a reduction. The noon drops out, and so the stem now is simply two letters. It is P and iota, and we have the augment, we have the personal ending, epion. Epion. All right. And peepto. So peepto in the imperfects, getting ahead of myself again. Peepto, to fall. Oh, by the way, pino, to drink, or I drink. Lambano, I take. Pipto, I fall. And the imperfect is epipton. So again, take the stem, add the augment, add the personal ending, and then the second aorist. Now we see both a change in vowel and a change in consonant, right? So now we see and a reduction. So to be specific, you actually see three changes there. The stem changes from P iota, P tau to P epsilon sigma. The sigma here is not an indicator of the first aorist. This is actually the shift from the present and the imperfect stem to the second aorist, and then this is the personal ending. Make sense?
I think so.
All right. Now, most of the aorists you're going to find are first aorists, but there's a lot of second aorists. And simply, you have to know what the second aorist forms are. And at the end of this exercise today, we're going to walk through the second aorist forms for the verbs that we have already learned in the other tenses. It is significant, and in fact, that significance is amplified by the fact that some of the verbs that are second aorists are extremely frequent. So, for instance, Lego, which you'll remember, the lexical form Lego, I say. The aorist is aepon, or in some cases, aepon. We'll see that there's a variant there. Don't need to think through that right now, but you'll either of those two forms. And the 40% of those aorist verbs that are second aorist include a few very common forms. So again, the aorist of Lego, apon, we'll see that as we go through here. So it's extremely frequent and important to commit to memory. Now, the second aorist active indicative. Again, the easy thing is these are all the personal ending that we saw with the imperfect, right? So we saw this with the imperfect tense form. This is exactly the same. You'll see again the correspondence between the first person singular, third person plural. We have in the first person singular elabon. Second aorist active indicative. Second person singular elabes.
Elabes.
Second aorist active indicative, third person elaben.
Elaben.
Elaben, yes. First person plural, so second aorist active indicative, plural. So first person plural, elabomen. Okay, so we have the augments, we have the personal ending, and we have the collapsed stem, elabomen. And then the second person plural, elabete.
Elabete.
Second, aorist active indicative, third person plural, elabon.
Elabon.
Okay, very good. And again, we already had mentioned that the aorist indicates that this is past action, and so that was true for the first aorist, and because the first aorist and second aorist have the same meaning, also true for the second aorist form. Now, the second aorist active indicative for gnosko. So we're going to see just a few differences. These don't need to be committed to memory. You just need to be able to recognize them by sight. Now, again, because it is a second aorist, what is the stem here, Ben, of this lexical form?
The stem of gnosko.
That's right.
Gno. Gnosk. I'm guessing the stem is just gnosk.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the new omega sigma kappa. So you can see here, this is the aorist active. There's the second aorist active root, which is now, and actually in this case, it has, if you want to be really specific, we're seeing several different things at once, right? So number one, there's a collapse. You can see that there's fewer characters in the stem. Number two, you can see that consonants have fallen out. Number three, you can see that vowels have fallen out, right? So no omega, I left. Number four, there's vocalic shifts. So now where you saw the gamma and the nu in sequence right here, the vowel actually is prepended. See that? So
Okay.
it's obviously there's a relationship here, gnosk, eng, right? You can articulate it, and that helps you to hear it and to sense it. But the shifts sometimes are complicated.
Yeah.
All right. So for this particular form, the first person, aorist active indicative, first person singular is engnon, and you can see here instead of an omicron that we have an omega nu. Okay.
Which is just a personal ending, right?
That's the personal ending, but you can see that there is lengthening here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Merkel and Plummer, if you want to see the mechanics behind that, they go through that in this chapter's text. The second person is engnos. Engnos.
Engnos.
Third person, second aorist active indicative. Third person singular for gnosko. Engno.
Engno.
Engno. Yeah. So you can see that it's omega dominant. And the same thing is true also, not just for the singular, but also for the plural. So first person plural, engnos, engnomen.
Engnomen.
Second person plural, engnote.
Engnote.
Third person plural, engnoson.
Engnoson.
Yeah. So it might help to take a look over here and notice that for this verb, notice how we said for the second aorist, active indicative, in general, it takes the imperfect personal endings. It's the same, which means that in most cases, the first person singular personal ending is the same as the third person plural. However, notice here that there is a difference between the first person singular and the third person plural, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, I think with examples like this, you don't need to memorize this verb chart. You just need to be able to know, okay, that one's different. Used to be go eng. Okay, eng. That's a change in the stem. I got it, right?
Right.
Now okay, now it needs to be augmented. Okay. And then you have okay, yeah, there's some endings here that look kind of similar. I don't see a movable nu here. I don't see the nu, but that's okay, right? That's a third person singular. And okay, that kind of looks like Omicron mu, epsilon nu, right? That I'm used to, but okay, I can see it's omega dominant. That's the way you need to think about these one-offs. And by the way, I mentioned here that this is the root, and I would have to double check that because there's two possibilities here, and I would just have to go to the lexicon to confirm. This could be one of the few examples that does not lengthen, right? So maybe this is the augment, just because epsilon there by itself, it could still be part of the stem, and maybe it's just gamma and nu that are part of the root. When you go to your lexicon, it's going to tell you that. So it'll include these principal parts. So these principal parts include the stem for the first person, always in the first person or the lexical form, rather. But you're always going to find the principal parts for the present and for the aorist and for all the different forms.
Okay.
But gnosko, is one of those ones that occurs really frequently, and you just need to recognize it by sight. Just know that it's omega dominant. And so again, sometimes all you have to do is be able to recognize a couple of the letters from the present word. You can make the correlation to say this must be a second aorist right here. And even if you didn't know this, you would look at this and say, yeah, that looks a lot like the imperfect endings, except that's a different plural and it looks to be omega dominant. Yeah, that's the way you want to think through these rather than rote memorization.
Right. Is it easier just to memorize the words that are going to appear funny, right? Odd. Which ones rather than to memorize all of the.
Yeah, because there's not that many. I mean, that are frequent in the New Testament. This is one of them, and that's why your text calls it out.
Right.
And you can see here that I actually, I was completely wrong on each count. So my apologies there. But you can see that epsilon is indeed the augment right here.
Okay.
Gamma, nu, omega is the new stem. So it's not two constants, it's actually three.
Omega is part.
Yeah, I was just actually looking at this today, but just went into mind meld there for a moment. So it's actually three letters that are part of the stem, and then the stem vowel combined with the connecting vowel. So that's why you don't actually see it here. So omega plus omicron actually equals omega, and that's why this is an omega dominant form.
Gotcha.
Now, you didn't memorize any of that. But sometimes it's helpful as you're learning to recognize these forms just to know that. So.
Gotcha.
All right, now let's take a look at the second aorist middle indicative for ginomai. So you remember ginomai, present middle indicative. So these are going to also be a little bit different because there is a spelling change in the stem. Now, here you have gamma iota nun, and of course here you have gamma epsilon nun, but you still see, okay, here's the epsilon augments, okay, here is the, first person personal ending, second person personal ending, third person, for each person a number here. So agenomen, agenu, agenito. Hopefully these now are starting to be familiar to you, right? Like you've seen these before and you recognize this as a second person personal ending. You recognize this as a third person personal ending, right? It looks very similar to forms that you've seen before, and you recognize that's the middle. That's the middle. And then the same with like the first person plural, agenomita. So that's the first person plural for the middle. Okay, you're like, yeah, I remember that. And then ageniste, agenon. So let's walk through the whole verb chart together. So second aorist, middle indicative, first person agenomen,
Agenomen,
agenu,
agenu,
agenito, excuse me.
agenito,
egenometa,
Egenometa.
egeneste,
Egeneste.
egenonto.
Egenonto.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. All right. So second aorist verbs. Now I said here we're going to drop a chart on you with all the forms for verbs you've already seen. Blepo in the present becomes, in the second aorist, eidon. Erchomai becomes eoton. Okay. Estio, meaning I eat, becomes ephagon. Ephagon means I ate, right? So you can see the new stem over here is phi alpha gamma. Lego, as we mentioned earlier, the aorist is aepone. Okay, there's a little variant here we'll talk about in just a moment. These are very common. So these are the ones that you certainly want to be able to recognize on sight right away. Last one on this list, pero, which is I bear or I carry, becomes enenkon. So quite a shift here, right? So I believe that this stem should be epsilon nu, epsilon gamma kappa. And then you augment, it becomes enon home. And this is the aorist, second aorist, active indicative, first person singular or third person plural, right? Let's just walk through the list again, just for review and for a little bit of drill. So blepo is I see.
I see. Comes Adon. I saw.
Yep, that's right. And then why don't you walk me through the rest of the list, Ben, since it's just us, at least on the video conference today.
So ergomai, I come, right?
I come or I go,
I go, yeah. Turns into elathon. Elathon, yeah. I went.
Ailton or Ailthon.
I went.
However you want to pronounce that. Ailton. That's correct. So the
thing just throws me off.
Yeah, the present stem or the lexical form, then that present stem will shift, and that's characteristic of the second aorist active, right? So erchomai becomes ailton or ailthon, depending on how you want to pronounce it. All right.
Estio. I actually can't remember what that means at the moment. Estio. I eat.
I eat, yes.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah,
go ahead. Mm-hmm.
It becomes epsagon.
Yeah, ephagon in the traditional, or epagon in what I think is a restored classical pronunciation or restored Attic pronunciation. So epagon, sto, I eat. Epagon, I eat. Mm-hmm. So let's try that again.
Estion, which becomes ephagon.
Yes.
I eat to I ate.
That's right. So the lexical gloss would be eat or I eat, and then in the aorist,
second aorist, first person singular. Eight. And then the next one, Lego. I speak.
I speak or I say, or I make an account.
So you have Lego, which from the lexical form changes into first person singular, second aorist, active indicative. Apion.
Aepone. Mm-hmm.
A-
Aepone. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Apone. So you don't say it as a it's not a wow, word's gone. The two vowels don't become one sound, they're distinct.
It is a diphthong. Yeah, so it's going to be the long vowel quantity. So the sound is going to have the same measure. So it's going to be long versus short, right? But
Apone.
the vowels are aepone.
Apone. Okay.
Yeah.
Apone. That would be I spoke or I said or I gave an
Mhm.
account, simply.
Yes.
Okay. And then Pharaoh or Pero is how
Mhm.
right? Okay. Um which I can't place the translation for that one at the moment either. Pero.
I carry, I bear a load, or
Okay. I I carried or no, I guess that's the lexical form, right? So I
mhm.
carried or I
Lexical. The
bear.
gloss would be
I
not a
carry
definition, but a
bear.
gloss, the nearest English equivalent, if you will. I carry.
Okay. I carry, which turns into second aorist, active indicative, first person singular, a negon, a negon,
Enenkon.
enengon,
Enenkon.
enengon,
So
gon,
rising pitch, flat pitch. Enenkon.
enengon.
That's right.
Okay. So that would be I carried or I
Yes.
bore something.
That's right. All right. Let's see. We have a few more here because we're going to go through the whole list of all the verbs you've learned that are second aorist. So
Okay. Bolo.
In the passive form. Now, there's not very many that are really in a passive form. Most of the ones you've learned are intransitive verbs. So, wouldn't make sense to say that, I was something. Let me see if you can find an example for you on the fly. I suppose you could see it with like, I was come. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's
Yeah,
intransitive, doesn't have an object, right? It has a subject and a predicate.
sure.
And here, ballo becomes eblatain. So I throw or I cast. And then here you see the aorist. You see the augment, which is for the aorist, could also be for the imperfect. But here you can see that there's been a stem shift.
Right. And that lets you in on it being aorist rather than imperfect.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And then you can see here the tense formative for the passive, right? Theta, eta. So eblatain, I was thrown or I was cast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Eurisco, I find or I discover. And the aorist would be uretane, so it's a second aorist. And you can see that in this case, the addition of the augment did not lead to lengthening of the vowel or
Yeah.
shifting.
Is that just because it is second aorist? The augment doesn't change it
Oops.
just because it's irregular?
No. So I accidentally hit home on this because I just jumped back where we were. Yeah, no, the second aorist, there's nothing.
It keeps jumping back to the beginning on you.
Every time I reach that slide, it wants to jump back on me. Maybe I hit another key on accident. Let's see what happens here. get back to where we were.
This should be the slide where we were.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Balo and Blathane, I throw, I cast, I was thrown, I was cast.
Yeah.
Okay. So Eurisco, then in the secondary passive is Eurectane. And you can see here that, first of all, you recognize the tense formative theta eta. So that's our indicator of the passive, along with the personal ending, which when you have a theta eta, then it's just a new. So that's our tense formative plus the personal ending. All right. Now, when in this, for this particular form, which is a diphthong with epsilon and upsilon, you're going to retain the rough breathing mark and there will be no shift. So it did get augmented, but that epsilon plus epsilon upsilon remains as epsilon upsilon.
So the diphthong seems to override kind of the augment. Is that kind of what's happening? So because eta upsilon wouldn't work, is that kind of a
That's a good question, whether that is
consistent that way?
yeah.
In the list, it looks like in the list in the book, it doesn't even have another diphthong like that to even compare.
So first of all, let me just say this is a very infrequent
Yeah.
Combination. But if you'll remember, when we're looking at the imperfect forms, that many EU forms do change in the aorist, but not always. And so it was more, I don't know that there's any rule really for this, because there are some EU verbs that actually
More
do
of an
change.
exception than a rule here.
Yeah, and in fact, there are some verbs, and I wish I could recall off the top of my head an example, but there's some that sometimes they augment and sometimes they don't.
Depending on like person and case and number.
No,
or is it dependent on context or something?
it's not context. It's specific to the verb. It's specific to the verb. So, for Eurisco, I'm trying to think actually if I can remember. I can't remember. Let's see. There's some that sometimes lengthen and sometimes don't. I mean, I seem to remember that there was, but I don't want to say that unless I'm 100% sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to take that as a note, actually, and I'm going to look into that. Give me 1 second here. Because now I'm curious to know that. Now, the point here, though, of course, is that you're not going to be surprised or fooled by any of this, because the point is you need to, for each of these verbs that do have secondaries, you do need to memorize, or just by sight, you need to be able to recognize that these are
Something different.
Yeah, there's something different. Yeah. The grammatical process is actually called suppletion. You don't need to know that, but yeah, it's a fundamental kind of change in just the stem. Yeah, but I can't think of any examples where sometimes it changes and sometimes it doesn't. So, but I'll look into that and then I'll confirm it.
Okay.
But in this course, it did not. And then Lego, and this is very interesting, right? Because you saw in the aorist active indicative, remember, it was aepone.
Yeah.
But here, passive, it's eretane. Eretane.
Kind of a totally different word almost.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And you can trace some similarities to the to the Greek. Well, there's some forms in English that do this too, but specifically in Greek, you can trace to the word rhema, which remember means word. Rhema, and then that seems that you can see some similarities in the root there, right?
Yeah, right
so
there.
There's a row. It's actually a doubled row, but then an epsilon. Okay.
Yeah, do you pronounce that as like a rolled R or something? Ereton thing? Erete?
Yeah. It's doubled consonant. So at the very least, it should be pronounced eretane. And the thought from Greek phonologists is that yes, this was a rolled velar velar voiced fricative. So the yeah, if you can do that. Yeah. All right. And then Sunago, which then becomes Sunikte.
Sunik.
Mm-hmm. So, I gathered together, and then I was gathered together.
Yeah.
All right, and then pero becomes a nickname. So it went from there was pero, I bear in the present tense, and then you remember it was a neckcane, and then in the or actually a nincone. Let's just a nincone. I'll try to say it again. A nincone. Yeah. And then in the second aorist passive, we have pero. The active becomes a ninctane. Neptane. Yeah. Even twist my tongue.
Yeah.
Tame. Yeah. When I learned Greek, there was not a heavy emphasis on reading the text, vocalizing the text.
Yeah.
And that's something, as we get through this course, I mean, we're in the second quarter right now, but I want to continue to emphasize that as we go through that. The rest of this course, that is, that we need to be developing that fluency and part of the reading fluency, I think, is pronunciation, because it's one of the steps of learning, right? You see things, you recognize it by sight, you're able to read through it quickly by sight, you're able to articulate it quickly, right? Those are stages of language acquisition. All right. And then there's a few of these second aorists that assimilate to the first aorist spelling. So I was talking about this earlier. So for instance, aeltone sometimes will become aeltan, right? So both of these you'll find in the New Testament. So this is a variant spelling.
Okay.
And so that's why it becomes important then to remember this sort of principal part, right? So when erchomai, eoton, eotan, right? So erchomai, I go or I come, eoton, I came or I went, eotan, I came and I went. It's just a spelling change. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then ebalon then becomes ebalan. So you'll sometimes see it with the alpha instead of the omicron here, right? So balo, I throw or I cast. Ebalon, I threw, I cast. Ebalon, I threw, I cast.
Does that seem to be tied at all to context, like like a or an in the English?
Not that I can tell. I will take, and I've never heard any grammars discuss that, but I actually want to research that, and I'll let you know next week if they're to alpha. Let's use. I don't believe so. I don't know if it's random or if there's an idiolectal difference, like some writers prefer it.
Yeah.
So, but you will see both of these forms.
Yeah.
Certainly this one, like, this variant, you'll find this frequently in the New Testament.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Edomen, remember, so blepo, I see. Edomen would be actually the plural, so we saw. And then you can see that this alpha shift sometimes, is occurs, and when it does, it occurs not just in the first person singular, but throughout the paradigm pattern. So Edomen.
Okay.
And then Aapon, and this is the example I referred to earlier with Aapon. This is also very frequent. You'll see these variants here too. So again, if you know the principal parts, epsilon iota p, epsilon iota p, then you should have no trouble passively recognizing these spelling variants, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And remember that this is a short personal ending. That's a variant of Omicron nu. It's alpha nu instead.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. I think that's all that I have for that. Any other questions right now?
No, I mean, yeah, the second aorist is just it's the oddballs.
It is, yeah. Just recognizing those principal parts, and sometimes the shifted stem will give you a clue. For instance, balo. Remember with the double lamed or not lamed, lambda, wrong language. And so you have balo, which then becomes ebalon, and so the stem becomes beta alpha lambda. So there you have a clue, but for some of these other ones, you don't.
Yeah.
So you just have to be able to know them.
Okay.
And then we can walk through some vocabulary here. So, iro, I take up or away. Yeah. You can repeat it after me again. So, iro. I take up or I take away. Apangelo, I announce or report.
Apangelo, I announce, I report.
Yeah. So notice you have the two doubled consonants. So it's not apagalo,
Yeah,
right?
apongelo.
So remember there was a rule when you have a double gamma that there's morphological, there's a consonantal shift here. So the vocalization shift. So it becomes eng. So ung, right? But it's also important to remember that there is a syllable division. So that means you have to pronounce the sounds separately. It's not a pangolo, it's a banga, right?
Apong,
A panga, a panga. Yeah?
apongelo. With the
Yeah.
double lambda, does it have any
It's a pangello.
apongelo?
Yeah, there you go. Because that's another, when you have those two consonants together, then that also forms a new syllable, right? After the first consonant.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
pangello, a
Yeah.
pangello, yeah. Apocteno, I kill or put to death. Mm-hmm.
Apocteno.
Mm-hmm. Apocteno, I kill or put to death. And then apostello, I send out.
Apostello. I send out.
Stello. Mm-hmm. That's right. There's another root, stello, which I think might have been part of your vocabulary, which means to put or to place something. And then, of course, this is a compound verb with the prefix preposition apo, which we remember means like from or away. So apostello. And in this case, this compound verb has a meaning which is intelligible from its constituent parts, the morphemes, the bound morpheme here, apo, which means away, stello, to place, so to place away, to send away, to send out, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. And then, of course, we get the word, from in English, apostle, which is
Yeah.
a transliteration of
Yeah.
the nominal form here, which is apostolos, which of course is apostle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably a good place to pause. And we won't spend too much time on it here, maybe even in the next class or one of these classes, where it makes a lot of sense for us to reflect, even if just for a moment, on some of the unique challenges created by transliteration into the English language and the potential obfuscation or blurring of the lexical definition. So let's just we could just take apostolos in Greek and apostle in English. Again, this was not an English word. It was taken from a Greek word, which in its most basic sense means someone who was sent out. Apostolos, apostello, right? I send out. So if you send somebody out, then and you apostello, right? But you apostelle them,
Yeah.
then they are apostoloi. They were apostles, right? Or apostolos. He's an apostle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do
So if
we?
you stello apostolus, I send apostles. And so then remember that's because that would be your, nominative masculine, accusative masculine plural, right? Apostolus. Now, if you send out apostles, then what are you doing? You're sending people out.
Yeah.
So, so sometimes what happens with the transliteration is we will unwittingly attach theological meaning
That's just
through
there.
yes, through the etymological derivation of the word. Apostle, in fact, is transliterative of apostolos, or from the the verbal root apostello. But in many cases, we come closer to really understanding the full meaning of the text by translating simply. Those who were sent out. Now, the first objection that someone will register to that is, well, are you saying that these are just regular people who were sent out? And didn't Jesus himself choose 12 and call them apostles? Well, he did. But it makes more sense to think of them as people who were sent out on a mission or with a commission.
Mhm.
And the uniqueness of that office and the characteristics of that office is defined by the selection of Jesus and by the parameters of the apostolic office that we find throughout the epistles of the New Testament that define what a sent one was, right?
Right.
So rather than looking at the word itself and trying to base the authority there, because our authoritative reading of what an apostle is doesn't come from its etymology. It comes from studying the way that the apostolic band was formed, how they were sent out, and their activities and characteristics, which are articulated, particularly in the Pauline epistles, right? So that's important, because when we get to some other very famous transliterations, that's where we start running into a lot of theological difficulty. We've already learned the root baptizo, to baptize, of course. Well, it certainly makes it easier for first-year Greek students. But in reality, well, we know that the word means to dip or to immerse, or in a figurative sense, it means to place into. And there are countless interpretive hermeneutical dead ends or theological misinterpretations or cultic interpretations, even that are based on the transliterated word baptized, which people will instill with a meaning that was not intended by the original authors in the way that they originally used it. They simply meant to say that somebody was placed into, or placed, in the case of water, they'd be placed under, we could say in English. So when we are, and this is the most frequent expression, or I should not say most frequent, but a frequent expression of our union with Christ in the New Testament, is to say that someone was baptized into Christ or placed into Christ. And that's important. The sense is to be placed into Christ, to put deep into Christ, to be almost it's not the literal sense, it's the physical sense, but the figurative sense, but the literal sense would be to dip into, right? To, like, it's that level of immersion, to be immersed into something. So it helps us to understand, I think, and clarify several important theological concepts in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Same is also true. I don't want to belabor this too much, because we'll find so many examples of this we have already. The word angel, which is actually a neutral word that means a messenger. And the question of the origin of that messenger needs to be determined contextually, not etymologically. And so I would advocate, for instance, in the book of Revelation, that we would do better justice to the text to translate the word angelos as messenger, and then leave it up to the interpreter to understand what type of messenger it is. Is it a messenger from heaven, an angel, or is it a messenger that's already attached to that church, who perhaps bears some sort of authority on behalf of the church as an emissary? delivering a message and receiving messages for that church, right? That's an interpretive question.
Sure. Yeah.
And starting to see the importance of recognizing transliterations, and it's particularly when we do interpretive work, not to be unduly influenced by the history of transliteration in translations of the Bible. Yeah.
Do we know about how many of them there are? How many words from the Greek New Testament were transliterated, or even the Hebrew, I guess, but how many were transliterated rather than translated?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know that. I mean, I can think off the top of my head of the most important ones, some of which we just talked about. Another one would be, for instance, like diakonos, which you may know. I can't and I cannot remember your vocabulary yet. I don't believe it was, but diakoneo is the lexical form I serve. Diakonos is the substantive, the noun that is derived from that verb, and it has the simple meaning of servant. Okay, and it should be translated as such. Whether that servant has a special place, position, or even a delegated authority needs to be determined interpretively.
Right.
And it's caused, I believe, it's caused a lot of confusion about the office of this, so-called diaconate, which essentially is just a class of servants in the church, by the fact that the unfortunate fact and historical fact that we've used transliteration instead of translation for this word. So that's just, certainly a pet peeve, but those are the main ones. There's a few others, but I don't think they cause quite the same level of confusion. So, for instance, like, certain Aramaic words will be transliterated, and that's fine. Amen, which means amen, so be it. Christos, of course, is a translation. Christ is a transliteration, rather. Right?
Right.
So the translation would be an anointed one, somebody who's anointed or who is christened or who is imbued with regnal authority, the authority to reign over a kingdom. Right. I don't think that causes the same level of confusion, although perhaps through the ages it has made even the title.
Yeah, it has taken a separate meaning over the ages. Sure.
Yeah, like I think it's actually less accessible to English speakers. So, for instance, in the Arabic, the word that is used for Christ is Messiah, which is a cognate to the Hebrew Mashiach, which means an anointed one. Yeah. The word is translated, not transliterated, and the translators of the principal Arabic version of the Bible, which is the Van Dyke version, could very well have transliterated that word, as virtually all of the English translators have done, except they're not always translators. Sometimes they're transliterators, right?
Right.
So they very well could have made that decision, but they decided that they would translate it rather than transliterate it. And I think that has an important benefit for the church, because right away it makes it very clear that this salvific figure, this figure who brings salvation, is also one who bears ultimate authority, and the imprint of complete delegation of that authority, and the pleasure of the Father to dispense with that charge to reign over God's people and eventually to reign over the entire earth. Right. So those are the sorts of things that can get obfuscated by transliteration rather than translation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so moving on, just to round out the vocabulary items, the next one is sparrow. Sparrow, which is I sow or I plant.
Sparrow. I sow plant.
Mm-hmm. I'm making a note to myself here. Give me 1 second, because I'm,
Yeah.
I'm casting some doubt on this, but actually sparrow. So the substantive would be spermos. Yes. So the English word sperm would come from that, not just the word spore. Yeah, both of them are derived from sparrow.
Okay.
Glossa, which is language or tongue, from which we get the word glossolalia, which is the idea of speaking in tongues. Laleo, meaning to speak, and then grape, the writing or the scripture. Get the English word graphics. This is another sort of I'd call it an interesting phenomenon. It's not as potentially misleading as when the whole concept of a word is transliterated. So the
Yeah.
whole idea of dipping or immersing has been the baptizo has been transliterated as baptism into English and its
Right.
related forms. But in English, sometimes you can get the word writing or scripture or graphics, right? And the other thing you have to recognize as well, and it's important for the class to know, is that often words that appear to be transliterations of the Greek are not glosses or specific definitions of that word, but are rather what they are called neologisms. And that's a word which was derived or fashioned in modern times based on deliberate imitation of a Greek root. And the word graphics almost certainly is a neologism, meaning then the importance of that is to say if somebody, and I can't tell you when the word graphics originated, but let's just say that it originated in early modern English, which actually is quite possible. It may have been a little bit earlier than that. Almost certainly, the meaning of that word, number one, in its original intention, uh, signified something that was foreign to the Greeks,
Mm-hmm.
but became relevant in modern times. And now I'm actually kind of curious about this. So I'm making another note to myself on this one, on derivation of graphics. But you can think of why the word, for instance, like a word like that might be coined. So in the early modern period is that the printing press is coming online, and there's a combination of text type and images that
Mm-hmm.
we use as pictures. And this is a hypothesis that would have to be proven from research, but I think it's very likely that the word graphics derived from the early modern period, as in relation to the printing press. Now, the word graphics, whether that's true or not, if you trace what graphics would have meant, assuming that it was around in the early modern period, to what it means today, well, the meaning has shifted and morphed again because of the advent of computer technology, graphics displays, and that sort of thing. And
Design.
typically,
Yeah.
yeah. So you need to be cautious about retrojection, of the taking the meaning of modern word and then imposing it back onto the original Greek text.
Right.
Okay. Litos, stone. So lithograph, another word, almost certainly a modern word. Naos, temple or sanctuary.
Naos.
Naos. And you'll remember, I think it was actually one of the vocabulary items. Hieron has a similar meaning. Temple.
Yeah.
Parabole, so parable.
Yeah.
Sophia, which is wisdom.
Sophia.
Sophia. Yeah, or Sophia in the traditional pronunciation. So wisdom. And we get the word sophistry or sophomore.
Yeah.
Word sophomore is actually a combined form from the word of wisdom, but the other word is moros, which means an idiot. Or we actually have the English word moron, which is derived from that. So sophomore meaning like a mixture of wisdom and folly. Soteria, salvation or deliverance. And chronos, time. And then the preposition dio, therefore, for this reason. Eutus, immediately or straight away.
Eutus.
That's
right. Mark's favorite word.
Yes. So, yeah, many passages in Mark. That's a narrative frame or discourse marker that.
Yeah.
I
was showing that to Bible study.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good stuff. Any other questions right now?
I don't think so. The book, the plan is to get through the book in 3 semesters, right?
3/4, yeah.
Yeah. 3/4. Okay. Cool.
We comfortably do.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, as long as we keep this pace up of 1 chapter at a time.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable pace, especially now. It kind of is slowing down. It's a little easier keeping pace. I feel like the beginning, they really cram a lot into the beginning.
They do. Yeah, and that's one thing I've noted. And
yeah, which is okay sometimes, and for some people it's a lot.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I think actually, if I was going to use this text again, what I'd probably do is I would probably, if people are going to take it in the fall, over the summer, I'd just have them learn the alphabet
ahead of time.
Yeah, and then do some exercises, and actually, I think that really is the way to go. It's just have them do like a daily dose of Greek or some exercises over the summer prior to coming in. This is required pre-work. It's not, it's not graded. You just need to just tell me that you did it every day. And then it's gonna, they're gonna go through, learn the alphabet, learn the pronunciation, and then it'll go through like some of the vocabulary items just to make the first quarter easier.
Yeah, it would be probably really helpful for people to do something like that because for me, I had done some of these things before. And so I had that. So it was easy to jump into it, where for others, it's hard when you don't have any background. If you don't know the alphabet, jumping into it can be kind of chaos.
I'm going to just stop the recording right now, just so I can get up online since we concluded the actual class portion.
Sounds good.
Let me see if it'll do that.